So I want to share my plans for a stash busting sweater that I'm going to start work on. I've collected all my odds and ends of this is cream and natural yarn, and then all my pinks and blues with some greys, all my partial balls, leftovers, a bit of yellow in there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold it multi-stranded with a few strands of the cream and then one strand of each of these colours, using quite a thick hook, probably 10 or 12 millimeters. I also have this mohair, which I got several cones for a song in a charity shop. I started making a sweater, which still has one sleeve to go. So I'm going to hold some of the mohair with each thread as well and just swap in one colour at a time. So the plan is to hold a strand of Aran double knit and full ply and the mohair together, and then swap one out. So if I think that's an Aran or worsted weight, so I will swap it for a bit of worsted weight of that. That's the general idea. It's not going to be exact. The gauge is going to be quite variable, but that's okay. It's hopefully going to be part of the look. I'm going to freestyle it, but hopefully if it works, I'll write up a little recipe so you can create your own with all of these amazing leftovers. So I'm home from holiday and I've got started on this, and it's morphed into 2 bags. This is all my cream yarn bits. Then this was the first body panel I tried. Now this one I used 7 strands altogether, so I used that superfine mohair with 6 strands of other. I'll just get it out and show you. Okay, so you can see I've still got these strands attached. This is working with a 12mm hook. I felt that this fabric was just a little bit too tight, so I started working with 6 strands altogether. So that was basically 3 strands of the cream instead of 4, and then 2 colours, sometimes 5 of the cream and 1 colour, and then this mohair. That cone is almost finished, so I'll show you the second attempt. So this is the second version, which is upside down at the moment. With this, because I'm not paying special attention to what yarn of weight I'm using, I'm trying to use a mix of weights, but you're always going to get some variation. So this starts off a little bit finer, and then at the moment I'm using more thicker yarns, so the fabric's going to be thicker, but overall I'm happier with this one. So I'm going to frog this one and pull out 1 strand of the yarn, carry on with this one probably for another couple of inches, and then I'm going to start, this is going to be my front panel that I'm going to start with, and I'm going to start working the v-neck. I couldn't find any scissors, so I haven't snipped off. I've used the Russian knot to join all of my yarn, but I just need to go in and chop off some of these ends that you can see there. I've used the Russian knot, which I'll link to. I'll put up a tutorial for that. So that's where we're at. Not quite sure how I'm going to frog this. I think what I'm going to do is keep it, it's interesting, I've got much more blue on this one than on that one, which is much more pinky. I don't know, maybe I've just got more brights. Anyway, I'm going to frog it, and I'm going to pull one of the strands out as I work, not sure which one yet, and then I'll rework essentially with the same yarn, just 1 less strand, because I think that's probably going to be the path of least resistance. Okay, I frogged it and I've separated this one out as I went. I'm not going to ball this up because everything's still attached at the other end. So I've put my hook back in. I actually frogged it back to here because it seems I started with the number of yarns that I wanted, and then I added 1 at some point. So I'm back to 6 strands of yarn. So that's basically 5, so 3 cream and 2 colours, and the mohair, so 4 cream. basically when you swap out a yarn, it's good to try and swap it out for something of a similar weight, so you keep a balance between all the different yarn weights as you go through. Now maybe say with the colours, I'll have Aran and different 4-ply, so I'll swap the cream over just to try and keep a balance of roughly maybe 2 Aran, 2 DK and 2 4-ply, or obviously you've got the lace weight mohair, so just a rough balance to try and keep your gauge vaguely consistent. So these are my 2 panels for my waist knot, want knot, stash busting sweater. These are the 2 body panels, and I'll just talk through how I made both if the cat leaves them alone. So this is the back panel. This is the one I started with. I made a foundation row of single crochet across the bottom, which I hope you can see the bottom there. I just eyeballed it. I ended up with 42 stitches, which was a nice wide width. I want it quite oversized in the body. You can choose whatever length suits you. Then I just work single crochet in the front loops only all the way up. And I eyeballed the length until I was about happy with it. I actually worked, because you're never quite sure how much yarn you've got with these stash busting projects, I worked the front and back in kind of tandem. So I worked the front section until I was kind of happy with this depth. So it's going to be a deep V. I'll add a trim here, but I kind of worked till I was roughly happy with that. And I knew I was going to decrease to a very wide V-neck, so I'll show you that later. But in total, I have done 42 stitches across, 38 rows, including these 2, which are just a bit of neck shaping on the back. So I continued from here. I worked 5 stitches across, 5 stitches across, and then fastened off. Then I reattached my yarn 5 stitches from the end, worked 5 across, 5 across, fastened off. So that is the back panel. The front panel, like I say, I worked in the same way. I didn't have scissors when I was working this, so I've got a few ends to chop in. I'll talk through in a separate section of the video of how and when I changed yarn colours. But again, 42 stitches across. I think I worked about 20 rows up, and then I worked halfway across, so that was 21 stitches. And then to decrease going this way, I chained 1 and skipped the first single crochet, and then single crochet in the front loop only. Then I came back working across until I had 2 stitches left, and then I worked a single crochet 2 together in the front loops for that side decrease. And then I continued those 2 row repeats up until I had 5 stitches left, which I'm gonna join to the back shaping for the shoulder seam. I then rejoined my yarn. This is actually the side I rejoined the yarn, so I started that side. I rejoined my yarn, worked across again, and then did the same, essentially the same decrease pattern in reverse. So when you're working from the inside outwards, you just chain 1 and skip the first stitch, and when you're coming this way, you work to 2 stitches from the end and work a single crochet 2 together over those last 2 stitches in the front loop. So you just did the same each side. This one, the tension is roughly the same on both. This one's maybe a little bit tighter, but nothing that won't stretch out. So the next part, I'm gonna join the shoulder seams, then I'll be wanting to create side seams. So once I've joined the shoulder seams, I'm gonna try this on, and then I'll just pinch this under my arm to know how deep I do or leave the armhole. I want it a relatively relaxed sleeve, but not huge. This is going to come probably to about the middle of my bicep, so it's quite wide. So I'll probably go for something around there. Again, eyeball it, try it on, see what works for you. Then I'll come back and I'm going to show you how I work with the multiple strands, how I change colour, and how I'm just going to work the sleeves in rounds out until they're long enough. So I'll go do that and I'll be back. So I have seamed up this side. This is the wrong side that's facing. Next I am going to start the sleeve. So I'm going to join my yarn to the top of the side seam, and then I'm going to work single crochets into the row end, so that's 1 single crochet for each row. Here you can see I've got yarn ready, so I've got my mohair, that's an Aran weight, that's roughly a 4-ply, and that's a DK. So they're my 4 cream yarns, and then I've got this teal, which I think is about an Aran, and this, which is a DK or sport weight. So I've joined them all together, created a slip knot which I've attached to my hook, and then I'm gonna join that to here and work round. So I'll show you once I've done a row. So there's my loop. I'll just leave my finger in there. I'm going to attach my yarn. I haven't sewn in the end where I've made the side seam. I've just used a single strand to sew down the side seam, so I'm just going to pull that loop up to start my first sleeve round. I will just to secure that, I'm going to pull that all through to chain. Then I'm going to work a single crochet into each row end along the top. It's easy to see that that's 2 rows there between these little ribs. So that's a single crochet all the way around. I've kept quite a relaxed tension throughout this project. Out of the way, cat. When working with a lot of strands like this, I find it quite easy to work on the bed, just because you've got a bit more space. So to keep these all together, excuse my receipt there, I've just popped them all in a big bag, and then I can just kind of pull, and it stops all the balls running all over the place. If you want, you can work it into the shoulder seam as well, just as long as you do the same on either sleeve, it's fine. So when I get to the end, I'm just going to slip stitch to the top of that first single crochet there. Chain 1, and then I'm going to turn. I'm going to turn at the end of each round. So that is my slip stitch, and this here is my first single crochet, and that's my chain 1. So chain 1, slip stitch. So I'm going to work into the front loop of that last single crochet of the previous round, and then I'm just going to work in the front loops all the way around. Now I'm going to keep doing this for the whole length of the sleeve. What I might do is try it on as I go, and having said I'm not going to do any decreases in the sleeve, I'll come back and tell you if I do. Before I do that, I just want to share how I change colours. So this teal that I'm using, there's quite a lot of this left, so if I used all of this I'd have a really big chunk. So what I've been doing, if I can just find what I've done with my scissors, I've been working a few rounds of colours where I've got a lot left and then fastening off, and then this is the remainder of the scrap yarns I've got left. So I've just kind of picked quite a random colour. So I think I'll join some of this pink, which is about the same weight. So I literally just pull some, something out, try to vaguely match colours, and then I will just join this to that end I've just snipped in using the Russian knot. I do have a separate tutorial for the Russian knot, which I will pop a link to. Essentially, you just tie it to one side, tie it to the other side. Then you pull it tight and snip off the ends. So again, I've got a reasonable amount of this pink left. I'll probably work a few rounds and then maybe I'll change this other pink, which I've not got too much left of. I'm just going to pop this off to the side. That's going to drop into that bag that I showed you. And then I'll keep working and the colour change will just come through. Some colours I only had a very small amount left, so I didn't fasten off in between. Don't overthink it, just pick colours you think will work all right together. I've got enough cream to kind of dilute anything that might clash. So I'm going to work a few rounds of this, just try it on to check how it sits on my arm. And then if I do decrease, I'll maybe make one stitch decrease every maybe 3 or 4 rounds. If you do decrease, make sure they're not all at the start or all at the end of right side or wrong side rounds, just so you get an even underseam. This is a right side round because this inside is the right side, but if I put all my decreases at the start of a right side round, then the decrease would kind of drift off in a diagonal. So make sure you either decrease at the start and the end, or if all your decreases are on one side, or if you're alternating decreases, say you do one every 5 rows, you can do it all at the start because every 5th row will either be a right or wrong alternating. Okay, bit of a tangent there, but hopefully that's useful. So I'm going to work a couple more rounds and then see. Okay, so having said I wasn't going to do any decreases, I decided the shoulders end of the sleeve felt a bit big, so I started off with 34 stitches in the round. No decrease that first round. Second and third round I decreased by 1 stitch at the end of each round. Then the 4th round I didn't do any decreases, so that takes me to 32. Then I did another 2 rounds of decreases, this time at the start of each round. And I've just tried it on and I'm happy with that, so I'm just going to work straight until I reach the cuff for that sleeve. So I've added the sleeves. This is obviously incredibly wide at the moment. I'm going to add a big ribbed section here, which will hopefully make it stay on my shoulders. And I'll also add a hem and some cuffs, which is why the sleeves come to just below my wrist. And hopefully I'll show you how much yarn I have left. This is the cream yarn that I have left, which will hopefully cover the rest. I'm going to go down to a 6mm hook for the neckline and cuffs, so we'll see how that goes. So I've saved this big ball for the neck, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to work a row of single crochet up the top, over the shoulder, round the back and down again. I've changed from a 12 to a 6mm hook for this, and I'm going to be experimenting, but I'm going to try with 2 single crochet for every row. That might be too many. I want to get some tension in here to kind of hold the neckline together. So I'll start with either two per row or maybe 3 every 2 rows. I'll have a play and see how that goes. Then I'm going to look at depth of the ribbing, which I'll probably make about that deep, so a couple of inches maybe. So to start my V-neck ribbing, I've worked 2 rounds of single crochet around the row ends, keeping the tension quite tight so it doesn't drop out. Then I didn't turn with the rounds of single crochet, then I carried on working on the wrong side, and I've worked 5 half double crochet in the back loop of the single crochet. The reason I've done this is I'm going to work another row back down there, slip stitch into these stitches and work my ribbing that way. I'm going to work this ribbing in the front third loop of the half double crochet. So if I flip that over, I'm going to be working into this loop here. So they're the top V's, and I'm going to work into these little loops on the front. So I'll work up and down, slip stitching into my single crochet round, and then I'll come back round the neckline to here. And then what I'll do to end the V-neck is, instead of slip stitching through both loops, when I get to this bit, I'll continue working in rows, and I'll be working up and down, so it'll be at right angles, and I'll work into those back loops once I get to these last 7 stitches. So I've done 7 half double crochet. Then the final row I'll finish off and I will stitch it back into here. This is all on the wrong side, so you'll have a nice neat overlapping V-neck section on the outside. Okay, so I've done a few rows, so you can see the V is connected there. I am working 7 stitches, that's how deep this is, and I'm alternating slip stitching into, so when I come back down here, I'll slip stitch into 2 stitches and then 3 stitches. I did work the whole thing slip stitching into 3 stitches, but it was just too tight, so I'm going to alternate that the whole way around, and I think that will work better. It's all dependent on how you distribute your stitches along the row end. So I was relatively tight with that already, so working into slip stitching into 3 just tightened it up further, and it was a bit too much. Along the back end, when I work my single crochets, I work 2 single crochet into 1 stitch and 1 into the next. So you can just see it's on the wrong side there, but you can see there's 2 in that stitch and then 1 in that stitch. So that is actually quite tight along the back already. So I will watch my tension as I go, but I'll probably continue slip stitching into 2, then 3. If that's still a little bit tight, I might just slip stitch into 2 all the way along. In terms of how that changes the gaps between the ribbing, overall it shouldn't really change it because your stitch height here doesn't change. And I think if you're consistent, then overall it should look fine. So I'm going to go ahead, work around the neckline back to here, and then I'll just show you what I meant about finishing off the V-neck, because it works quite well when I tried it the first time round, even though it was too tight. So I've worked up over one shoulder and I'm just going across the back. I'm much happier with the tension this time. One thing I did want to note about the way I work my ribbing is in the last stitch of the row, I always work through both loops. So I'm working through this this front third loop, but at the top there I work through both loops when I'm going that way. And then when I start a row to come down this way, I just chain 1 to start. I don't just chain 2. And what that tends to do is that tends to keep the edge neat, regardless of the type of ribbing I'm doing. If it's back loop, front loop, third loop, I always just work through both loops on the edge, just because it tends to kind of keep it tight. Okay, so I've worked all around the neckline, and this was the part I was going to show you. So I'm still on the wrong side. You can see my ends are there. I've just gone down, that's a right side row, and it's time to slip stitch in. So you can see, let's go a bit closer. I've slip stitched in that stitch on the previous row. So I'm gonna slip stitch into, these are those unworked loops. So when I worked that first row, I worked into the back loop. These are those front loops. So I'm just gonna slip stitch. Let me just change hands so I can use my left hand. I'm going to slip stitch into this loop here and pop through there, and then that next one. I'm on a 2 slip stitch row now, and then I'll work up and down, and then I'll slip stitch into the next 3, and then I'll slip stitch into the next 2, and then I'll show you how I'll just sew it all on. Essentially I'll sew that last row up there, so you've got a nice little square overlap. Okay, so I've slip stitched into all of those back loops or front loops from when I first worked them. You can see it doesn't quite match. What I'm wanting is to join this to this edge, but because this isn't, if this was an exact right angle, which it's not, it would go like that. But I don't want to put any extra stress on it, so actually what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to no, because I only did that in two. I'm going to work another row down, and then if I need to, another row up, just so I can then sew that in the end, and I don't have any tugging. So I'll do another row and we'll see if that's enough. Okay, so what I've done on this final row, I worked another row down and I just slip stitched back into the single crochet that was in the center of the v-neck. And then I've worked another row up, but I worked 3 single crochets, and then I worked my 4 half double. So now I'm going to fasten this off, pull it through, and I'm just going to stitch this row here along that row there, so it should sit nice and flush. I'll do that, turn it around and just check it's going to work out okay. Okay, so I've sewn that end in. I actually reworked it because the back was too tight. So the way I've finalised the neckline, I've slip stitched into 2 stitches, then 3 stitches, 2, 3, 2, 3, all the way up the side. Then along the back, I've slip stitched into 3 stitches each time all the way along the back, just to keep that tight enough so the shoulders aren't too wide. And then again down this side, slip stitch into 2, then 3, then 2, then 3, all the way down. And then I've just stitched that down there, and now I'm going to reattach my yarn to the bottom. Starting at the side seams, I'm going to work with the wrong side facing. I'm going to work I'm going to do the same as I did for the back neck. So I'm going to work 2 stitches, then 1 stitch into each of these base stitches. This is the bottom of the foundation chain. I'll do that around, but I want to keep the hem quite relaxed. So when I work the hem, because those single crochet rounds are going to be quite tight, I'll work the hem slip stitching into 2, then 3, 2, then 3, like I have up the front. And that should, famous last words, give me a hem which is kind of flush with the rest of the sweater, so there'll be no shaping on it. Then I'll do the cuffs where I am going to want shaping. So I'll have a play around with how I'm going to do the cuffs and then come back and show you those. So here we have, apart from the ends, the finished sweater. I'll just go through quickly what I did again with the or the ribbing. So the neckline, I worked 2 rows of single crochet in the same direction with the wrong side facing, and then I worked the band round as I've explained before. I basically slip stitched into 3, then 2, then 3, then 2 all along the v-neck, and around the back I slip stitched into 3 stitches, but I threw in a 2 stitch every now and again. It took some practice to get the tension how I need it to be, but I did make it tighter up at the top back here just to make sure the shoulders stayed where they were. The hem, I again worked around 2 rounds of single crochet from the wrong side, so I worked 2 stitches in one of the foundation chains, then 1 stitch, then 2 stitch, then 1 stitch all the way around. Then I worked another row of single crochet, 1 stitch in each on that. Then along the bottom I mostly slip stitched just into 2 stitches because those rounds of single crochet were already relatively tight, so I mostly did 2 stitches, and I threw in a 3 slip stitches every now and again just to keep the tension roughly even. It doesn't have to be perfect, but just have a play. Then for the cuffs I worked it a little bit differently. Again, I worked the 2 stitches and 3 stitches in the final stitch of the sleeve. That was the first round. The second round I just worked 1 single crochet in each. Then I worked a 3rd round of single crochet, and in that round I worked 1 single crochet and then 1 single crochet, 2 together. Then round the edge I largely slip stitched into 2 stitches on the last round. Sorry, I largely stitched into 3 stitches, and then I threw in a 2 stitch every now and again. So altogether on the cuff, I've got 24 rows. So I've basically got 12 ribs. When I joined the ribs, you can see here how I joined the ribbing. Essentially, I worked again in that front loop, and then I slip stitched through the corresponding starting chain. So when you turn it the right way round, one second. So when you turn it the right way round, it's actually quite hard to see the join. You can see that's where I've joined, and it doesn't look particularly different to the other joins. You can tell it on the wrong side a little bit more clearly. That's the normal rib, and then that is the join. Let's just get that a bit more focused. There we go. So yeah, that is that. And now I just need to get some focus back. I just need to sew the ends in, and that is going to keep me warm all winter. I do, however, have some yarn left. This is what I've got left from everything I started with. It's quite a lot of cream. I do have some other colours, so I think I'm going to make a hat. Watch this space.